I'm Dr. Zohara Hieronimus. Laura Kortner is our executive producer, and Anita Brockington runs our board. Joining us this hour is a man who, like Matthew Fox, believes that a better world is made through self-awareness and better human relations among ourselves. Conflict resolution, compassionate listening, holistic medicine, gentle touch, and other things, other forms of peaceful engagement help us learn to resolve differences. And this is a passion of our guest, Gabriel Pickus. Gabriel's the founder. He directs and serves as the lead teaching artist for the Baltimore Wisdom Project. Under the auspices of BWP, Gabriel's the program director and research coordinator for the Whole Child Intervention Program at Franklin Square Elementary Middle School with Kennedy Krieger Institute Center for Neurodevelopmental and Imaging Research. He joins us now to share how one organization, working in collaboration with others, can help a new generation of people discover the inner tools of compassion, both for oneself and others, of service, of self-development, all aspects for creating a more just and sustainable future. Thank you so much for joining us, Gabriel.
Thank you for having me on the show. I'm really honored to be here.
Your name I can remember.
Well, you summed it up pretty well right there. We can just say goodnight at this point.
All right. Thank you so much. That was very easy. I love the fact that part of what you call what you do is wisdom education. So let's first talk about where you got started, because you didn't just jump into this out of nowhere.
No, we all stand on the shoulders of giants, like Dr. Theodore Richards of the Chicago Wisdom Project and his teacher, Matthew Fox, who I believe was your previous guest.
Yes. So Theodore Richards of the Wisdom Project, tell us about that work and how you got started.
Well, I went to Goucher College in Baltimore after living abroad in Israel, Palestine, doing some coexistence and peace-building work out there after high school. And attending Goucher, I ended up volunteering in Baltimore City Public Schools. And I just became immediately aware of the problems and also was struck by how I could fit in and how I could help. Given my experience in alternative education. And I was first introduced to Baltimore City Public Schools by my Capoeira Angola teacher, Sakir Brown, who was teaching kids in Baltimore how to do martial arts and how to tell a new story about their history. But I noticed that, despite the wonderful, enriching experience of being exposed to African Brazilian martial art for African American children, some of them really resonated with it and some of them didn't. So I've moved towards a more holistic approach, and in that process discovered Dr. Richards' work in Chicago. And since then, the Baltimore Wisdom Project was a natural outgrowth. So I can explain more about that more specifically if you'd like, or we could get into whatever you're curious about.
Yeah, well, we will, but your background is quite fascinating. You mentioned that you worked in Israel, Habonam Dror, which you graduated and spent 14 summers. It's an international youth movement, right, that values, quote, social justice, collaboration, and positive identity formation. So tell us about the work that you did there and how it manifests.
Sure. Well, I started there when I was going into 6th grade. And I guess it all goes back to even before that, when I went to a Montessori bilingual kindergarten.
How fascinating.
And, I actually attended a Spanish-speaking preschool before that. So my introduction to education was through alternative models. And as I transitioned from this bilingual Montessori school where we got to explore and play all day, and we had different stations of, internal, external exploration, different sensory and group inputs, then I ended up in regular public school in 1st grade, and I just hated it. And the linearity of it all.
Yeah.
So once I got to summer camp, I was thrilled to find that they were steeped in this rich alternative learning models, and also that they were, part of my Jewish heritage, which I hadn't really reclaimed at that point in my life. So not only was I learning about my own culture for the first time, but I was learning about it in a way that really resonated with me. So that kind of primed me to become, steeped in that culture. And I still have friends that, live across the street from me today.
Isn't that wonderful?
Are connected with Havonim Dror, which actually means the builders of liberty, or the builders of justice. So there's a strong social justice root that runs through that part of my life, and those styles of education are really what I'm bringing to Baltimore City classrooms today. So it all was rooted there, and it's interesting how life works
Baltimore
like that.
has been in the national news for all the wrong reasons recently, and I read off of one of your papers that according to the last United States Census of approximately 621,000 residents of Baltimore City, an estimated 21% are under the age of 18, 63% are African American, 24% live below the poverty level, 26% hold a bachelor's degree, 24% of youth 16 to 19 drop out of school, 45% graduate from high school, and 28% of the population, or approximately 43,000 residents, live in poverty. Our city has its own particular blessings and challenges. So when you started this work, and now you are in schools and you have an opportunity to work with kids, let's talk about the foundations, because just as it's new to these children, it is new to many people, no matter their age, their color, or their socioeconomic background, of what you're doing. So when we talk about the Baltimore Wisdom Project and what you bring children, yes, share with us, Gabriel, some of the ways you go about bringing a child to appreciating not only self-development, but compassion.
Sure. Well, I'll back up and just talk about wisdom education for a second.
Okay.
And because I think it's really ironic, actually, that we consider these traditional models that have come out of the, prison or factory school model in recent history as kind of our roots, when actually our roots are much older and deeper than that. And so the things that I'm doing with youth are natural. And they take to them because they're natural and they're naturally engaging. And then, the work that we're really doing now is focused around 4 major initiatives. And it's nice to feel that there's a groundswell from the community, from teachers, from parents, and from the students for this idea of the whole child. And simultaneously, there's a top-down initiative from the Baltimore City Public Schools at North Avenue Central Office to kind of say, we recognize this need. But the problem is, and this is where we come in, is that there's a big gap in one, the ability to just go for it, to try new things with kids, quote unquote new things, right, that are actually very old. And then, to actually have the expertise on these 4 areas, which I'll name now. We're focused on trauma-informed care for trauma-impacted youth. We're focused on restorative justice, as opposed to punitive models that perpetuate cycles of violence and, negative patterns of behavior. We're focused on arts integration. And then those within arts integration is, a lot. But one major component that I think is so essential for the health of our children is to engage the physical body. We're told to sit down all day and, the health problems ensue. And then one thing I think people overlook is that our brains aren't getting enough blood when we sit down all day. So kids aren't thinking clearly, in addition to all the other things they're dealing with. Now their bodies are being harmed by being forced to sit. So we do several forms of arts integration in the classroom, but the major one that we're focused on is incorporating movement and empowering teachers to feel that they can not only manage their students, but they can actually use movement as a teaching tool. So that, and I guess one other comment I'll throw in is that sometimes these initiatives in trauma-informed care, restorative justice, or arts integration that together may point towards or work towards an idea of a whole child. Are you still there?
Yes, I am. No, I'm just loving what you have to say. You know, I've done so many different interviews over the decades about holistic healthcare and, as you call it, wisdom education, education for the whole child. I recently, there's a beautiful new book out by State of the World. It's called State of the World, and it's for new education. And there's a thing in Europe called the forest schools, where the schools for the kids are entirely in the forest, and they put up just sort of cabins. It doesn't take a big infrastructure, and the entire class curriculum is based in nature. And that's what they argue we need to do, is not only to educate for a more ecologically aware society, but also a youth community who are educated from their childhood on up about the needs of our planet right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, I got cut off there for a second, but I moved closer to my Wi-Fi, so I should be good now.
All right. Well, I was just saying that along the lines you're speaking to, yes, there is an awareness worldwide that this old factory school system of information in, information out is not only very destructive, but it's not an education. An education of the child should unfold a child for each individual. So we're going to take a little break. When we come back, hopefully we'll have all of our technical stuff worked out here, and we'll be right back. If you're just joining us, my guest is Gabriel Pickus, and you can find Gabriel's work at www.baltimorewisdomproject.org.
You're listening to 21st Century Radio with Zoe and Bob Hieronimus. My name is Stefan Schwartz. It's my pleasure to be here. You're going to hear interesting conversation on this that you won't hear elsewhere, and you can find my work on www.schwartzreport.net or www.explorejournal.com/content/Schwartz. 21st Century Radio is leading this conversation of what a conscious world will look like.
Our guest this hour is Gabriel Pickus. His work, the Baltimore Wisdom Project. You can learn more at baltimorewisdomproject.org. So, Gabriel, you have a very broad, what's the right word, skill set that you bring to helping children find a holistic worldview, not only of themselves, but how they interact in the world. You're also a Healing Touch certified practitioner. You're also a drummer and an artist. How do all of these things come together when you sit down and say, all right, I wanted to address this one particular thing you talked about, which deals with trauma. Trauma-informed care. What specifically is that? Because so much of the world really suffers from post-traumatic stress syndrome and other things that are related to it.
Well, I can't pretend to be an expert on trauma-informed care, but one thing that I can say is that most educators are not taking that into account in terms of what may be triggering a child's behavior.
Yeah.
For example, in any situation that any person in an authority position might want to de-escalate, for example, recent police shootings of people with mental illness, the police weren't taking into account the person's social, emotional, mental state. So you never know. I guess my motto is to always assume that I've triggered something, or that someone is being triggered, whether it's by a smell, whether it's by an experience, whether it's by something somebody said, and that the aggression that they're acting out, I think, and this goes into how trauma-informed care is inextricably tied to restorative justice, because as soon as somebody acts out, it's about the rule in school that they're breaking, or as opposed to, the help that they're crying out for, or, for example, if somebody is getting in an argument with another student, the tendency is to assume that, that there's something wrong with them, but they should be punished for it, as opposed to there's something wrong with them, but they need help.
Right.
And
right.
So just that subtle shift, like we have in many cases, people have the right idea, but they don't have the skill set to identify, like, oh yeah, that person is triggered by this person's perfume, and so that's why they're telling everyone that they stink and causing a fight. And if there were resources in schools to not just have people who can have that skill set to identify that as like, oh, this person is being triggered by a past trauma right now, and kind of name that, but then also to have the resources to actually pull them out and help them work through that so that they can return to the group. And, then at that point, instead of being punished, they need to repair the relationships that they've maybe harmed. So it's really about relationships instead of rules. It's really about, again, working towards the whole child. I wouldn't just isolate trauma-informed care, which is the point I was trying to get to before, is basically like we tend to create systems that further compartmentalize,
yes,
based on the, I don't know what to call it, the assembly line model. Where you go to some, let's say that the school is really great and they have awesome arts program and they have this really awesome trauma-informed care approach and they're using restorative justice, but these things are happening in a way that's still compartmentalized, so it falls short of being holistic. The way to do it is to integrate it and have it interwoven throughout the day, and have the character development is not something that you can do as like a dessert. It has to be part of the meal. It has to be part of the actual thing that they're there to do, is character development, in addition to academic learning. So what tends to happen is, these programs get sidelined because they say, oh, it takes away from academic time. But our approach of integration of trauma-informed care, restorative justice, and the arts really allows those lessons to be learned in an integrated fashion alongside their academic work, or as a part of their academic work. So I'm literally dancing and skip counting,
mm-hmm.
During math class, and literally having people, do team building and, restorative discussions as they're learning about science. And I can give concrete examples of that if you're interested.
But, it's wonderful. But I was going to say something back to this issue of trauma and the drug war in Baltimore and the drug war everywhere. I mean, the drug war has created an environment of chaos and violence for everybody. And it doesn't just go away because you don't hear about it. And so I'd like to say that in many parts of major cities everywhere, people have such fear for good reason. It's not uninformed fear, but at the same time, fear leads to these draconian responses, as you point out, rather than responses that are integrative and loving. And so at some of the schools, they have these quiet rooms where kids can go for timeout and meditation and quiet reflection. But again, that's a compartmentalization. All of a sudden, there's this place you go outside the classroom when you feel like you need to cool down, versus an opportunity, as you point out, and we currently have an administration that is just all the wrong examples of all the wrong behavior of grown humans, which doesn't help anybody. But at least you have an opportunity, and other educators like you who really do love children and who really do appreciate that these children are just these beautiful beings just waiting to unfold, but they aren't given this nurturing environment in which to do it because there's so much, I guess the pressure is in performance, like, in the outcome-based education. And I guess this, but when public education was formed, there are no laws to educate a child. There are only laws about attendance. I think that's still true to this day. the only real laws about school was that a child must attend, and that had a lot to do with the factories and the farmers and when the children were in off-season, et cetera, but it had nothing to do with educating.
Right. Well, the Department of Education was founded after the Civil War, and originally it was envisioned as like this beacon of building a fully informed populace to participate in a functioning democracy. But then, the powers that be took a look at the plan and decided that they would rather have factory workers, and then the prison industrial complex was founded alongside of it in order to basically re-enslave the population because of the gaping hole in the 13th Amendment that allows enslavement only if you're incarcerated. So you're absolutely right. The progression of history all the way back to the Civil War, leads us to this place today where now the No Child Left Behind Act was kind of the first attempt at codifying performance within public schools. But it ended up being a very kind of punished by it made the bad situations worse and the good situations the same. It didn't improve anything, and now that act has finally been repealed, or I guess it expired and it wasn't renewed. So now there's this new law that gives the states and the local jurisdictions a lot more autonomy to decide what their curriculum looks like and what the needs of their students are and how to address them. So we're at a very important time, especially in Baltimore City public schools, as this whole child initiative is being rolled out. And again, I have the utmost respect for organizations that are making the effort. I don't want to discount the work of the kind of compartmentalized programs that, do arts and do restorative justice and really are incorporating more holistic, toward a holistic approach. But I just want to, really be clear that a rock solid holistic approach would be integrative.
And you talk about that. I mean, the Baltimore Wisdom Project, you're really working to create this wise group of community members who can manage conflicts, as you say, and support our peers, particularly as young people become leaders in the world, as you point out. So there's wisdom integration in the school, there's wisdom integration out of the school, and then you talk about intercultural youth leadership programs. Talk to us a bit about that effort.
Sure. Well, I have to lift up Rastre Subira, who's my co-facilitator in those two major projects that we've undertaken. One of them is called Olam Ubuntu, and Olam is the Hebrew word for world, and Ubuntu is an Nguni Bantu philosophy that roughly translates to "I am because we are." And I can't understate I can't overstate the ways that Ubuntu has been completely infused within, that section of the continent and beyond. My friend who actually just left my house has a PhD in the way that Ubuntu has impacted professional life in South Africa, from banks to, all types of business. So what we are doing is combining Olam and Ubuntu to create a program that roughly translates to creating a world where I am because we are. And it's a Jewish and Black youth leadership program. And we actually, when we were first forming the program, we had a couple parents kind of say like, well, my son or daughter, they go to school in a diverse school, and they kind of sit with kids that don't look like them, and so what do we need this for? And our response is that it's one thing to unintentionally be in diverse spaces. It's another thing to intentionally, integrate communities and talk about the issues that divide them in order to further integrate, and then also have the youth bring their parents and their community members together for events where they take leadership and they're, really breaking down boundaries, facilitating discussions, and using their passions, whether it's poetry, whether it's art, whether it's videography, to actually create social change within those contexts. So that's the first program. The second program is the Elijah Cummings Youth Leadership Program in Israel. Reached out. They sent, actually, it was I believe it was 10 African American youth and 1 Palestinian youth from Elijah Cummings district, and they reached out to through Forefront Baltimore, which is a kind of collaboration of Jewish teen leadership programs. So they paired kind of 11 and 11. So there's 22 kids. 11 of them have had this intense travel experience abroad in Israel, and 11 of them have some of them have met, some of them haven't. And they're seniors in high school. So we're doing sessions with them that will lead up to a presentation and community building event where, again, the youth will facilitate the kind of discussions about the issues that they brought up through their artistic work and through their kind of social justice autobiographies that they're creating. So they're really forming an identity, not just as activists, but also as artists, by really getting in touch with themselves and finding out how their creativity can be a tool for social change.
That's lovely. That's wonderful. I also see that the Baltimore Wisdom Project offers healing services. I mean, you really are holistic in all ways. It's almost like the one-stop shop for kids. I think it's fantastic.
Well, we don't do energy healing for kids per se through the Baltimore Wisdom Project, but my practice as a healing touch practitioner really informs my practice as a holistic educator.
In what ways?
Sure, I can go through it in detail according to the chakra system. Would that be an okay to
Well,
word
sure.
to
Our
use
audience
on your
is
show?
familiar with all these things, and as you know, I founded the Ruscombe Mansion Community Health Center, which is it is the oldest holistic healing center in the country now. But
Wow.
yeah, tell us firstly what healing touch is, and then how it informs your work as an educator.
Sure. Yeah, healing touch is an energy-based approach. It's very gentle, hands on the body, hands off the body, and our goal is to just create the conditions for the body to heal. So a lot of times what people aren't able to do is get their body into a state of peace and relaxation so that their body can use its natural wisdom to do what it does, which is heal itself and grow itself back and make itself stronger. So healing touch uses the meridians, uses the chakras, and uses the layers of the energy field to create a state of equilibrium and restore balance in the body so that you can relax and heal.
Right.
And people have pretty profound but varying experiences on the table, depending on what they bring to it and how deep they allow themselves to go. But pretty much everybody has a great experience. So the chakras, I don't know how familiar folks are with them, but I come from a Jewish tradition which uses the tree of life. So there's actually 10 Sefirot, but I find that the 7-day cycle and the 7 chakra system is just as, it's all the same. It just depends on which kind of language you're using to describe it.
Yeah.
Because there's major and minor energy centers. So I'll just go through the major ones. So the first one is associated with the element earth, and it has all these other properties to it. But the most important thing in terms of how the holistic health approach informs my holistic education is, like you were talking about before, nature, right? Nature and family and the earth. So we take kids on a camping trip once the Olam Ubuntu Youth Leadership Program. That group will go in May. We take kids up to Pearlstone Retreat Center, and increasingly we're finding more and more opportunities to get kids out in nature and really connect with each other and with the earth. And then second is the the kind of sacral center chakra, which is associated with relationships. So we want to really help youth feel supported. So this is where we might do restorative justice circles, where we just kind of talk about the issues and talk about how we're feeling and really develop emotional intelligence. And then we'll do some team building stuff, just introduction to how to rely on each other, support each other, and feel supported. Then third is the solar plexus. So that's all about your core, yourself, your identity. So we do a little bit of that in our ancestry work at the beginning, but eventually it's really about, establishing your core identities and really being clear about what it is that you want and what it is that you don't want, and how you can, really name the issues and really name who you are. Then fourth is the heart, which is associated with compassion and conflict management. So that's where we really get into role playing and martial art and being clear on how our breath can really help us relieve stress and how that applies to internal as well as external interactions with others. And fifth would be the throat center, which is about speaking our truth and creative expression. So again, we're using in a cumulative way, right? Now they're able to express themselves so that they can compassionately work together to fight against the the problems in the world that they've identified and named. And then sixth would be their ability to kind of map out and envision the life that they want for themselves and really see how to problem solve and generate action plans related to social justice or action plans related to, their own well-being. And seventh is really about their relationship with a higher power. So we don't get to talk about that a lot in school. We do kind of create avenues for that through like Avatar, The Last Airbender cartoon and, different yoga ideas without getting too controversial, talking about how we are made of stars, right? And we are water, and how that water draws its ancestry from the very elements that were birthed in the stars. So really having a sense of core identity, but also having a sense of cosmic identity and really finding our place in the universe.
That's lovely. I love the way you described it based in the chakra system, and it has such clarity. That's just wonderful. For anybody, we have to take a break, but for anybody in the audience, if they have an interest in speaking with you, what's the best way to reach you? Do you prefer it by email? Is there a phone number people can use during work hours?
Sure, yeah. Anybody can call my cell, but the best is BaltimoreWisdomProject@gmail.com, BaltimoreWisdomProject.org. We're at Baltimore Wisdom on Twitter. We're Baltimore Wisdom Project on Facebook. All those are really great.
Okay,
And,
Baltimore
my
Wisdom.
phone number's on the website. So.
Okay, Baltimore Wisdom Project at gmail.com, you said?
That's right.
At gmail.com. And we'll be right back. If you're just joining us, our guest is Gabriel Pickus. He is the director and teaching artist with the Baltimore Wisdom Project.
Hello, this is Diana Leaf Christian, author of Creating a Life Together and Finding Community. You can learn more about me and my work and my doing consultations and workshops and speaking at conferences at www.dianaleafchristian.org, Leaf, L-E-A-F-E, DianaLeafChristian.org. You're listening to 21st Century Radio with Dr. Zohara, Hieronimus.
So, Gabriel, we've talked about a number of things from the Baltimore Wisdom Project and your work in various schools. Is there something we've not touched upon that you are focused on or that you'd like to share with us?
I guess we haven't really talked about the mindfulness piece.
Great, please do.
Well, I had a little revelation the other day, and I kind of came up with this process. So what I realized is that there's so much judgment that's happening, especially of ourselves when we want to do transformative work. So let's say that I begin with the thought that I want to lose weight, right? That's based on a judgment
Right.
of myself. So I think that the idea of observation through mindfulness work as a place of just to start, and so one of the co-teachers that I work with through the Kennedy Krieger Institute at Franklin Square, her kind of covert goal that she comes with every day for the kids is to just get them to find peace, just get them to find quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And then and once they get there, then they're so appreciative of it. But it's just such a struggle to get there. So how can we strategically get kids to that place where they're observing themselves, and then eventually, right, once they're able to observe, then all of the angst and all of the stuff that they didn't want to look at, which is why they were so resistant to doing the self-reflection in the first place, it starts to come up. So then we have to practice non-judgment. And I think that, this lesson is just as important for an adult practitioner, which is why I'm taking notes on it myself. So once we can observe ourselves honestly and then not judge, then we can start to practice. Then we can start to work on the problems that we can then name and identify. So we've used the practice of mindfulness to observe ourselves. Then we're not judging ourselves, and then we're naming the problem, and then we're able to practice. And then once we practice, I think a lot of programs kind of stop there, right? But one of our goals, again, with the integrative approach, is to take our work off the mat, so to speak, or off the meditation cushion. Mm-hmm. So, it's all well and good to be able to be peaceful in a peaceful environment. But a lot of times that's not the reality that these kids or that we are dealing with on a daily basis. So the next and most important step of the work is to then be able to apply these lessons that we've learned by learning to be, by finding peace, finding quiet, and apply them to our lives so that we can kind of find the eye at the center of the storm, so to speak. So from a martial art perspective, it means repatterning our reactions to stress so that we exhale and relax under physical, psychological, or emotional pressure, as opposed to tense up and freeze or freak out and not be, able to survive or function, let alone, calm somebody else down. So that's the process that I've kind of recently been able to articulate, and I think it's one that I need to work on still. I don't say it from any position of expertise, but I think all the best educators are really learning alongside their students, and in that way they're able to genuinely remain fresh and interesting, as opposed to just trying the same thing that worked maybe 10 years ago.
I think from the many people I've interviewed over the decades and more recently, you're not alone in appreciating that the education needed today is not the education of yesterday, and that has to stop. Mm-hmm. And there's an appreciation, I think, by school systems as well about the failure of the school system for our children nationwide. I mean, the dumbing down of education has been extraordinary, and the making of conformity has really destroyed those who are so inspired to be teachers. I mean, that's the beauty of being a teacher, that you actually have these creative environments, presumably, in which you can literally nurture these children who have come before you and your care. And we all know as adults, I can look back at my own life, and there were certain teachers that inspired me to become exactly what I eventually became. Not that I knew that, but there were certain aptitudes I had. And that's the joy, I think, for a teacher, is to see a child unfold and discover who they are and what they value and what they can do, not what they can't do, not what they aren't designed for. This conformity is really the disaster of our world. And that's why I think such creative people like you are just such a wondrous addition to all of the school systems everywhere, because fortunately people like you exist in all our cities, and there are people making efforts, much against sometimes the protocol of the hierarchy in these administrations, to really do exactly what you're saying, which is to give our kids today the skills you need for today, which is a resilience and a willingness to listen and to share, because we are in a point, in planetary evolution and local ecologies and local economies where if there just really isn't any option. That's the way I look at it. There really is no other choice but to respond creatively with right human relations in mind as a cornerstone, not as just an afterthought.
Exactly. Yeah, and have it be integrated throughout the process of whatever else we have to learn. I think you're right on point. Of course, the CEOs of today, when they name the top qualities that they want in their employees, none of those things are being funded or taught in the schools. It's creativity, it's original thinking, it's problem solving, it's the ability to collaborate with others. Obviously we need that foundational, knowledge of the world, but the emphasis on wisdom doesn't. The point that I think is really essential is that when we emphasize wisdom, it doesn't mean that we're not emphasizing knowledge, right? Wisdom requires knowledge, but knowledge does not require wisdom. And I think we've gotten into a very kind of increasingly smaller pigeonhole of knowledge accumulation being the goal. When again, there's no point of having all this knowledge if you can't apply it. So in order to, I guess I wanted to circle back to a comment that you said earlier, which is kind of like, how is this all connected? Like, how do you get this all to be one thing? And for me personally, like hitting a drum in a sensitive way to get the right sound is the same as hitting a person in order to get the right reaction. It doesn't necessarily, like, I'm not trying to break my drum. I'm not trying to break anybody. It's about empowering. It's about learning how to make each other stronger. The same thing with, the art that I'm creating, the art itself, not just about the strike, but about the song that we're singing or the dance that we're making or the problem that we're solving. It's all the same strategic approach, whether it's holistic health or holistic education. We have to be fully informed about, like you said, our planetary and species, evolutionary history, right? We're contributing to the evolution of consciousness itself. So, these kids have, like you said, they're these investments that consciousness has loaned.
Well, when we look at the challenges that we as adults know the planet faces, and then we think of how are we educating and rearing these next generations to be well equipped, to be inspired to rise up to the mess, basically, that the last 200 years have created or more. We're not talking about little things anymore, but we are actually talking about the little thing called love and the little thing called respect and appreciation and restoration and resilience and et cetera, et cetera. Well, I think what you're doing and then making the effort to do, it's easy for me to understand, and I think probably for our audience as well, because what you're talking about is bringing out the best in each person and creating community in a way that honors the child as an individual with their unique needs and are responding to that reality versus, treating everybody as we have historically the same, and that's just not appropriate anymore. I want to thank you. We do have to say goodnight. I want to encourage my audience to visit your website, BaltimoreWisdomProject.org. You all can help support wherever these programs might be available. If you know a school system you think or a particular school that you think would benefit by the presence of the Baltimore Wisdom Project, please get in touch with them. That's what they're here for. Thank you for joining us. 21st Century Radio is produced by Hieronimus and Company. Our executive producer and research assistant is Laura Kortner, and I'm Dr. Zohara Hieronimus. And remember, we do need more love in the world.